Chapter 6 The Giants. "But if you are so nice and friendly," Sophie said, "then why did you snatch me from my bed and run away with me?" "Because you saw me," the big friendly giant answered. "If anyone is ever seeing a giant, he or she must be taken away hip switch." "Why?" asked Sophie. "Well, first of all," said the BFG, "human beings is not really believing in giants, is they? Human beings is not thinking we exist." "I do," Sophie said. "Ah, but that is only because you have seen me," cried the BFG. "I cannot possibly allow anyone, even little girls, to be seeing me and staying at home. The first thing you would be doing, you would be scuttling around, yodeling the news that you were actually seeing a giant, and then a great giant hunt, a mighty giant look-see, would be starting up all over the world, with the human beings all rummaging for the great giant you saw and getting wildly excited. People will be coming rushing and bushing after me with goodness knows what, and they would be catching me and locking me into a cage to be stared at. They would be putting me into the zoo or the bunkin' house with all those squiggling hippo dumplings and crocodile dillies." Sophie knew that what the giant said was true. If any person reported actually having seen a giant haunting the streets of a town at night, there would most certainly be a terrific hullabaloo across the world. "I will bet you," the BFG went on, "that you would have been splashing the news all over the wonky world, wouldn't you, if I hadn't wiggled you away?" "I suppose I would," Sophie said. "And that would never do," said the BFG. "So what will happen to me now?" Sophie asked. "If you do go back, you will be telling the world," said the BFG, "most likely on the telly bunkum box and the radio squeaker. So you will just have to be staying here with me for the rest of your life." "Oh, no!" cried Sophie. "Oh, yes," said the BFG. "But I warn you not ever to go whiffling about out of this cave without I is with you, or you will be coming to an ucky-mucky end. I is showing you now who is going to eat you up if they is ever catching even one tiny little glimp of you." The big friendly giant picked Sophie off the table and carried her to the cave entrance. He rolled a huge stone to one side and said, "Peep out over there, little girl, and tell me what you was seeing." Sophie, sitting on the BFG's hand, peeped out of the cave. The sun was up now and shining fiery hot over the great yellow wasteland with its blue rocks and dead trees. "Is you seeing them?" the BFG asked. Sophie, squinting through the glare of the sun, saw several tremendous tall figures moving among the rocks about 500 yards away. 3 or 4 others were sitting quite motionless on the rocks themselves. "This is giant country," the BFG said. "Those is all giants, every one." It was a brain-boggling sight. The giants were all naked, except for a sort of short skirt around their waists, and their skins were burnt brown by the sun. But it was the sheer size of each one of them that boggled Sophie's brain most of all. They were simply colossal, far taller and wider than the big friendly giant upon whose hand she was now sitting. And oh, how ugly they were! Many of them had large bellies. All of them had long arms and big feet. They were too far away for their faces to be seen clearly, and perhaps that was a good thing. "What on earth are they doing?" Sophie asked. "Nothing," said the BFG. "They is just moochling and foochling around and waiting for the night to come. Then they will all be galloping off to places where people is living to find their suppers." "You mean to Turkey?" Sophie said. "Bone-crunching giant will be galloping to Turkey, of course," said the BFG. "But the others will be whiffling off to all sorts of flung-away places like Wellington for the booty flavor and Panama for the hattie taste. Every giant is having his own favorite hunting ground." "Do they ever go to England?" Sophie asked. "Often," said the BFG. "They say the English is tasting ever so wonderfully of cod scallop." "I'm not sure I quite know what that means," Sophie said. "Meaning is not important," said the BFG. "I cannot be right all the time. Quite often I is left instead of right." "And are all those beastly giants over there really going off again tonight to eat people?" Sophie asked. "All of them is guzzling human beings every night," the BFG answered. "All of them excepting me. That is why you will be coming to an ucky-mucky end if any of them should ever be getting his gobblers upon you." You would be swallowed up like a piece of pumpkin pie, all in one dollop. But eating people is horrible, Sophie cried. It's frightful. Why doesn't someone stop them? And who, please, is going to be stopping them? Asked the BFG. Couldn't you? Said Sophie. Never in a pig's whistle, cried the BFG. All of those man-eating giants is enormous and very fierce. They is all at least 2 times my whiteness and double my royal highness. Twice as high as you are, cried Sophie. Easily that, said the BFG. You is seeing them in the distance, but just wait till you get them close up. Those giants is all at least 50 feet tall, with huge muscles and cockles alive. I is the titchy one. I is the runt. 24 feet is puddle nuts in giant country. You mustn't feel bad about it, Sophie said. I think you're just great. Why, even your toes must be as big as sausages. Bigger, said the BFG, looking pleased. They is as big as bumpo hammers. How many giants are there out there? Sophie asked. 9 altogether, answered the BFG. That means, said Sophie, that somewhere in the world, every single night, 9 wretched people get carried away and eaten alive. More, said the BFG. It is all depending, you see, on how big the human beings is. Japanese beans is very small, so a giant will need to gobble up about 6 Japanese before he is feeling full up. Others, like the Norway people and the Yankee Doodles, is ever so much bigger, and usually 2 or 3 of those makes a good tuck-in. But do these disgusting giants go to every single country in the world? Sophie asked. All countries excepting Greece is getting visited some time or another, the BFG answered. The country which a giant visits is depending on how he is feeling. If it is very warm weather and a giant is feeling as hot as a sizzle pan, he will probably go galloping far up to the Frisbee North to get himself an Eskimo or 2 to cool him down. A nice fat Eskimo to a giant is like a lovely ice cream lolly to you. I'll take your word for it, Sophie said. And then again, if it is a frosty night and the giant is frigid with cold, he will probably point his nose towards the sweltering hotlands to guzzle a few Hottentots to warm him up. How perfectly horrible, Sophie said. Nothing hots a cold giant up like a hot Hottentot, the BFG said. And if you were to put me down on the ground and I was to walk out among them now, Sophie said, would they really eat me up? Like a whiffswiddle, cried the BFG. And what is more, you is so small, they wouldn't even have to chew you. The first one to be seeing you would pick you up in his fingers, and down you'd go like a drop of drain water. Let's go back inside, Sophie said. I hate even watching them. Chapter 7, The Marvelous Ears. Back in the cave, the big friendly giant sat Sophie down once again on the enormous table. Is you quite snuggly there in your nightie? He asked. You isn't frigid cold? I'm fine, Sophie said. I cannot help thinking, said the BFG, about your poor mother and father. By now, they must be jipping and scumping all over the house, shouting, Hello, hello, where is Sophie gone? I don't have a mother and father, Sophie said. They both died when I was a baby. Oh, you poor little scrumpet, cried the BFG. Is you not missing them very badly? Not really, Sophie said, because I never knew them. You is making me sad, the BFG said, rubbing his eyes. Don't be sad, Sophie said. No one is going to be worrying too much about me. That place you took me from was the village orphanage. We are all orphans in there. You is an orphan? Yes. How many is there in there? 10 of us, Sophie said. All little girls. Was you happy there? The BFG asked. I hated it, Sophie said. The woman who ran it was called Mrs. Clonkers, and if she caught you breaking any of the rules, like getting out of bed at night or not folding up your clothes, you got punished. How is you getting punished? She locked us in the dark cellar for a day and a night without anything to eat or drink. The rotten old rot trasper, cried the BFG. It was horrid, Sophie said. We used to dread it. There were rats down there. You could hear them creeping about. "The filthy old Fizzwiggler!" shouted the BFG. "That is the hardest thing I is hearing for years. You is making me sadder than ever." All at once, a huge tear that would have filled a bucket rolled down one of the BFG's cheeks and fell with a splash on the floor. It made quite a puddle. Sophie watched with astonishment. What a strange and moody creature this is, she thought. One moment he's telling me my head is full of squashed flies, and the next moment his heart is melting for me because Mrs. Clockers locks us in the cellar. "The thing that worries me," Sophie said, "is having to stay in this dreadful place for the rest of my life. The orphanage was pretty awful, but I wouldn't have been there forever, would I?" "All is my fault," the BFG said. "I is the one who kid-snatched you." Yet another enormous tear welled from his eye and splashed onto the floor. "Now I come to think of it, I won't actually be here all that long," Sophie said. "I is afraid you will," the BFG said. "No, I won't," Sophie said. "Those brutes out there are bound to catch me sooner or later and have me for tea." "I is never going to let that happen," the BFG said. For a few moments, the cave was silent. Then Sophie said, "May I ask you a question?" The BFG wiped the tears from his eyes with the back of his hand and gave Sophie a long, thoughtful stare. "Shoot away," he said. "Would you please tell me what you were doing in our village last night? Why were you poking that long trumpet thing into the Gucci children's bedroom and then blowing through it?" "Aha!" cried the BFG, sitting up suddenly in his chair. "Now we is getting nosier than a Parker." "And the suitcase you were carrying," Sophie said. "What on earth was that all about?" The BFG stared suspiciously at the small girl sitting cross-legged on the table. "You was asking me to tell you whoopsie big secrets," he said. "Secrets that nobody is ever hearing before." "I won't tell a soul," Sophie said. "I swear it. How could I anyway? I'm stuck here for the rest of my life." "You could be telling the other giants." "No, I couldn't," Sophie said. "You told me they would eat me up the moment they saw me." "And so they would," said the BFG. "You is a human being, and human beings is like strawbunkles and cream to those giants." "If they are going to eat me the moment they see me, then I wouldn't have time to tell them anything, would I?" Sophie said. "You wouldn't," said the BFG. "Then why did you say I might?" "Because I is brimful of buzzburgers," the BFG said. "If you listen to everything I am saying, you will be getting earache." "Please tell me what you were doing in our village," Sophie said. "I promise you can trust me." "Would you teach me how to make an elephant?" the BFG asked. "What do you mean?" Sophie said. "I would dearly love to have an elephant to ride on," the BFG said dreamily. "I would so much love to have a jumbly big elephant and go riding through green forests, picking peachy fruits off the trees all day long. This is a sizzling, hot, muck-frumping country we is living in. Nothing grows in it except snozcumbers. I would love to go somewhere else and pick peachy fruits in the early morning from the back of an elephant." Sophie was quite moved by this curious statement. "Perhaps one day we will get you an elephant," she said, "and peachy fruits as well. Now tell me what you were doing in our village."